Hi, I'm Steve O'Halloran of Asset Labs, and this presentation is all about using Microsoft Map for a SAM audit without going Stark.Raving.Mad. And this presentation is brought to you in conjunction with ITAM's December 2015 ITAM Awareness Campaign. And personally, I'd suggest for those of you that have yet to subscribe to a personal or a corporate membership of ITAM, well, join the LinkedIn forum that they have to see the conversations that are happening. That'll give you a very good idea of what more you can also receive. And for those who are members, we also suggest that you consider the CSAM certification. All of our licensing experts and support crew are required to take and pass the CSAM exam, so we value it highly. With that robust endorsement of ITAM, let's not forget who we are. You may not have heard of Asset Labs directly. Our core business in the past has been to provide software licensing and Microsoft ELP, that's effective license position, reports to selected Microsoft partners and licensing experts such as PC Connection, More Direct, Software One, CompuCom, software licensing advisors, Method 180, a list goes on. And Asset Labs actually arose from the ashes of a previous web-based SAM solution called Asset Metrics, and it too offered SAM analysis using a web-based inventory tool until it was bought by Microsoft in 2006. Fast forward a couple years later, and Asset Labs figures out how to auto-calculate your Microsoft portfolio position without making an inventory tool. The funny thing is, we were prohibited from making an inventory tool. We sold that intellectual property to Microsoft, along with the company. So we were stuck. We couldn't build an inventory tool. And funny thing was, 6 or 7 years later, instead of drowning of thirst of data, we're drowning in it. So we figured out how to input the inventory data that you already have in other systems in order to auto-calculate your ELP using purchase data and inventory data and calculating that. And soon after that, Microsoft ramps up their SAM program and introduces MAP as a tool to assist in collecting inventory data. They also create silver and gold SAM partners out there who you might have worked with when receiving a Microsoft audit request. And since then, we have been doing many Microsoft audits and reviews through our selected partners. You can see them down below, by making MAP actually work without going Stark.Raving.Mad, of course. Now, we tend to keep a low profile, but we are proud of many reviews, including a very early review from ITAM Review quite a few years ago, and that was even before the beginning of using Microsoft Map. So here we are, we're navigating the seas of license and installs, and it really looks like smooth sailing, of course. Nothing's going wrong when all of a sudden, out of the blue, you get this letter. There it is. And there it is. Microsoft stating respectfully, requesting that you conduct an internal audit, much in the same way that a police officer requests that you show your driver's license and registration. A no response is not anticipated, and it's probably not a good thing for you to say no, but you do have some rights, right? And there at the bottom of the letter is a suggestion to use their MAP tool. It's not mandatory, but they say, please, consider it. And so what is this MAP tool? And that's what we're going to discover in this video. And we're going to go over the points listed here to help you understand where and how to use MAP. We're going to talk about the security and privacy issues. And again, I just said it, where and how to use MAP. How to set up MAP for Windows desktops and servers, which is different for setting up MAP for VMware. And that's actually a very important distinction on how to use it. We're also going to deal with many of the tactical errors that happen, WMI errors, Windows Management Instrumentation errors, that MAP will throw at you. We know how to deal with it. And we're also going to help you determine if there's enough data being collected. And then after that, it's like, what do you do with the data, right? And so let's start. So, what is MAP? MAP stands for Microsoft Assessment and Planning Toolkit, which I guess I should have called it MAPIT, but that's okay. And it is a Windows-based utility, and you install it, but what it is not is just as important as what it is. It is not a SAM or licensing tool. It will not calculate your entitlement position. It's also not a device management tool. It doesn't manage your network devices. It is basically a one-time utility. I mean, you can reset it and reuse it. But its real focus and its original intent was to be a sort of a sales tool in order to help you understand what it would take to move over to Azure, what it would take to move over to SQL Server 2012, what would it take to migrate over to Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10. It had to collect effectively all of the relevant data on your servers and on your desktops and on your Exchange mailboxes in order to figure out what it would take to move from your current or legacy Microsoft technologies to a new one. All of that data just happened to be absolutely congruent with a license audit or SAM review. So the SAM community a few years ago had effectively hijacked and stolen the baby and has used it so predominantly that Microsoft has basically dedicated personnel and technologies so that, yes, it will help you figure out what the cost could be to move over from another technology that uses hypervisor to Microsoft hypervisor, or to move from a database system that's not Microsoft to Microsoft. It will also help figure out all of the data required for a license analysis. Now, it is agentless. There's nothing that's installed anywhere else except on one machine. And we'll talk about what that one machine is in a minute. And it uses a series of different and combined technologies to make calls out to the network, whether it's PuTTY, PowerShell, WMI, in order to collect information. Now, its advantage is that it does collect inventory data that is deeper than what something like SCCM or Lansweeper or Altiris or Tivoli could collect. More important, it also collects the VMware host to VM relationships, and it's free. And I guess that's the biggest thing as well. So now that we know what MAP is, and we'll take a look at how it looks in a minute, let's talk about the perceived and actual security and privacy issues that surround MAP. First of all, let's talk about the security issues. Does the data somehow drift over to a Microsoft server all by itself? No, it does not phone home. Microsoft MAP is a completely isolated application. It has no communications protocols whatsoever to send data to any third party. Nothing leaves the building, right, as far as that is concerned. Even more so, when you type in your admin password, as soon as you close Microsoft MAP down, it's gone, right? It's a bit frustrating at times, but it's highly secure in that context that it will not even store or auto-store your favorite passwords as being the administrator. Reason being is that you may not be the administrator or the network administrator or the AD administrator. Someone might type it in for you and let you use it, and then away you go. Of what it does collect is important. It's also important as what it does not collect. So it does not identify the activities of the users. It will not identify that Bob is using Microsoft Excel 10 times a week, or has used it for 37 minutes today, or has never used PowerPoint at all. So there's no metering function, and there's no user activity. As well, it will not tell you that Sally is going to CNN.com every 10 minutes on a browser. So it does not identify browser activity either. Furthermore, it will not identify devices or components behind the drywall. So it won't do your routers or your bridges or your firewall devices. It will not identify topological information. It will not be able to identify the network per se. It won't just be able to figure that out. From a privacy perspective, we have a different spin here. The issue is that Microsoft MAP collects all software off all Windows and VMware and Linux and Unix devices in your environment where it can grab it. And in that sense, it's almost what we'll call a corporate X-ray. No, it won't find the elevators. It won't scan any skeletons, but it might find skeletons in the closet. So here's the issue: if you're doing a review with a Microsoft SAM partner and they give you MAP, or Microsoft says, will you please use MAP, and then can you give us the MAP data? You may want to pause on this one. A lot of data that is outside the context of the Microsoft assessment is going to be delivered to Microsoft, either directly or indirectly. And you should be checking with your legal counsel to determine if you want to do that. Our initial opinion is no. There are things in there that, though legitimate per se, may cause issues, such as if you identify an instance of SQL Server to be in a non-production state. In other words, no, we're using it for testing and development. But there are other tools or products from other vendors on that Windows server with SQL Server that suggest that it might be a production server, such as, management tools or firewall or security tools. Then it does pose the question, if you look at that Windows server as a whole, going, really? Are you sure that's a non-production server? Are you sure that's development? Because it looks like you've got the thing pumped up to be basically sitting in your production environment. So those questions could be asked if that information is found. So our initial opinion is resist, but the resistance, you are going to receive resistance as well due to the automation and the commercialization that has happened here. Microsoft is working with many third-party vendors to assist you in your assessment. And you may be working with a gold SAM partner who's collecting the data on Microsoft's behalf, and they may be sending up that back file in whole or in part to another third-party tool contracted out by Microsoft called Inviso, in which that information is finally reviewed and interrogated against your license data, and an ELP is generated. But data outside the context of the review or the audit is going up. We do highly suggest consult all actions with your legal counsel. Obtain an NDA with the third party that is working on behalf of Microsoft and working with you to deliver the assessment. And identify succinctly and clearly the limits of what data will be looked at, what will not be looked at as part of a set of terms and conditions. Remember, the letter that you were sent most likely says that MAP is not compulsory to be used, right? But MAP, it works so well and it's so convenient, and there's a machine out there ready to take that data, that you will get a lot of suggestions and please, can we just use the MAP data? It'll be so much easier, right? Take that very carefully. That being said, let's talk about how to install MAP, the do's and the don'ts, right? It is a Windows application. Now, here's first of all the list of don'ts. Do not put it on a production server, right? It will be using a lot of network bandwidth temporarily and will be using a little bit of CPU information, and it's just not worth it. Do not, and we'll explain why in a minute, do not put it on a virtual PC. Microsoft MAP is benign. It's fine. You can put it somewhere else and it will run it. Now, in fact, if you're using the virtual PC function within your Windows 7 or Windows 10, there are some limits. First of all, the virtual PC is usually defaulted to 1 gigabyte of RAM or to that virtual PC, to a maximum of 3.7 if you're on a 32-bit operating system. So you're limited to 1 to 3.7 gigabytes of RAM. The instance of SQL Server that you're getting is an Express Edition, which is also limited to 1 gigabyte. So it's putting those multiple constraints on a utility that's going to require a little bit of communication with the other devices across the network, not warranted. And we've done it many times. The other thing to do is, when you're going to be installing it on a real physical machine, that you place it somewhere in your network, that you're somewhere within the core section of the network, that you're not on, let's say, the wrong end of a leased line DSL, right? You're not in a branch office trying to inventory the headquarters located on the other side of the continent. No, you really want it where all the activity is. Because there's a lot of concurrent information requests going through at the same time. So a very, very thin pipe, like a leased line DSL or a microwave, it's not going to work. And don't try to use it in most cases with an instance of SQL Server that you may already have, and you're going to set up another instance, a MapDB instance. It comes with its own instance, and it's good enough in almost all cases that we've worked with. Now, the do scenario is, go ahead and find, an old indestructible IBM ThinkPad. They're everywhere, right? And they're just still kicking. If you can get Windows 7 on it, you're fine. That is a minimum. You're going to need Windows 7. And of course, as I said before, put it on a primary LAN segment. Now, at this point, you should be saying, hold on, what's going on here? I understand what you're saying, but why can't we use what we already have? I've got SCCM, I've got Tivoli, I've got Altiris. What's the matter with the tools that we already have? In almost all of these tools, there are two shortcomings, both technological and also from, we'll call, an internal administrative issue, in which even if the products such as System Center or Altiris or Landesk or Tivoli were able to fix, there is there's an issue that will prevent it at the same time. But let's talk about the two things that MAP does so well that the other products do not. Now, first of all, what we're looking at here is actually, well, my add remove section. And here's the issue, that if you can see, highlighted in gray is Microsoft SQL Server 2012 64-bit. Do you see the addition? No. Is it Express, Standard, Enterprise? Express is free. Enterprise is the price of a midlife crisis vehicle at $8,000 per core, minimum 4 cores. So that's $32,000 to start. Which one is it? You don't know. Why isn't it there, right? Because just above, you can see Microsoft Office Pro Plus. There's the addition right there, Professional Plus. Where's the addition to SQL Server? Well, the way that SQL Server has been instrumented since 2008 is that the addition is not declared in the add remove section or the uninstall section of the registry. The addition can be found, but it's in such a unique place that it's outside the standard call used by SCCM or Tivoli or even WMI for that matter, to when the technology goes, like the inventory agent goes, hey, hey, Mr. Device, what's on you, right? And it goes, well, here's all my add and remove stuff, and that's good enough. To show you the details where it is, what we're looking at here are the guts of the registry, and you'll see Microsoft SQL Server on top. You'll see 100, 110, and then 90. So there's actually information about 3 different versions, version 9, version 10, version 11, which is 2005, 2008, 2012. And just to show you that, and to prove the point that you can see that the edition type or the edition is standard, but it's found based upon in a unique place in the registry based upon the current version, right? So it's all over the place. This is why tools such as Tivoli, SCCM, and other sort of network management or client management tools inherently do not collect the addition of SQL Server. Even if they did, here's the other problem. And this is probably even more valuable or just as valuable as the addition of SQL Server, is getting the host to VM relationship of your hypervisor or environments, right? And so in this case, we're using VMware. It could have been Citrix environment. It could have been Microsoft Hyper-V, but I'm just going to use VMware because almost everybody has it. And so there is a many-to-one relationship of multiple Windows servers or VMs being hosted on the VMware host, and that host could be in a cluster. That relationship, the parent-to-child relationship, creates a huge cost savings, if understood, for SQL Server and Windows Server outside the bounds of Windows-based technology. In this case, it's VMware technology, right? And so the Microsoft Windows agent, or sorry, the Microsoft SCCM agent or the Tivoli agent or so on, doesn't necessarily collect this information. And even if they did, here's the other problem. Data center administrators do not like agents on their production servers in which the machine is automatically rebooted because of some sort of update. It's against corporate policy. So even if the technology existed, the typical rule is thou shalt not put an agent that can reboot my machine on my host or my data production servers. It just won't happen. That being said, one shout out to a very, very interesting application called LANsweeper. It's usually used on the lower end of corporate sizes, but it does everything. It picks up the VMware host to VM relationships, it picks up the additions of SQL Server, and it is a desktop management application that you can purchase, and it does collect the information. It's almost like the combination of a light version of SCCM and MAP all put together. And so when we find customers with LensWeeper, we go, excellent, let's keep going quickly. So there you go. So if you're interested in what you're doing with MAP, but doing it again and again, and you don't have a larger tool like SCCM, or if you have a branch office that could use some sort of regional-based network management tool, then LensWeeper is an option that you should consider. And so let's talk about actually running MAP. Section 4, running MAP. This is where we're going to take a look at what MAP looks like and where the buttons are to push in order to get the right data and in what sequence we're going to push them. Here is what the interface will look like after you install it and attempt to do your first inventory. This is probably more relevant for those people who've gone ahead and installed it and pressed buttons and all this kind of stuff. And so you're going to see on the left-hand side a number of panels. Sorry, the panels are on the right-hand side, and the overviews are on the left-hand side, where you can click on Overview, Environment, Usage Tracking, Database. We're going to look into a few of these, not all. The trick here is that the panels, each of the panels that you see here, the scenarios, each open up to a larger box. It's not that evident. So if you want to see the inventory results as a data set or as a graph, you have to click on the inventory results box in the middle. Same thing for Linux environment, Windows environment, and so on. Up above, it says collect inventory data in steps to complete. And you'll find that in these boxes, and you'll be hitting that button a lot because you're going to discover that your inventory success is rather low. So let's go take a look at what's going to happen the second time that you do an inventory. This is the inventory and assessment scenario. Basically, this can be quite complicated. MAP, like an elevator, has a lot of buttons and can take you up to the top and get you where you want to go, but not if you press all the buttons at once, so please don't do this. The inventory scenarios, we do suggest that you do one or two at a time. Some of them can be combined, some of them should be separate. I will go over them very briefly, but keep in mind you can put your mouse over each one and it will give you a brief overview or a description as you see. So yes, Windows computers, we're going to do Windows computers. Linux and Unix computers, probably not. Let's be honest here. VMware computers, this is not your virtual machines. These are actually the hosts. Yeah, so, true, they are computers, but these are your ESXi hosts that are hosting your virtualized Windows servers that have SQL Server and other things on them. So we're going to do these second, active devices and users. This is where MAP can tap into your Active Directory, pick up the device names and the user names. There's no full inventory within Active Directory. It will remember the operating system of the device and the users associated to the devices, but not the inventory. That's where the Windows computers go. Exchange server, endpoint protection, link server, these are unique functions in which you need, in most cases, PowerShell operating on the machines and PowerShell writes, which is usually part of your network admin. Lastly, something near and dear to my heart, but I have to say something that we should avoid at this particular moment are the software ID or SWID tags. SWID tags are an independent XML file that a vendor will establish and place onto a computer during the installation of a product. It contains a lot of data, and it's in an XML structure. Asset Labs, for full disclosure, represents Canada on the ISO 19770 working group, and -1, -2, -3, there's a whole bunch of these dashes, and -1 is about process, -2 is about the SWID tags, and Microsoft is just starting. Adobe is going full speed on these SWID tags, but there are issues at heart. We now actually have duplicated data, and for all it's worth, though I love SWID tags, in this particular time, in this particular year of 2015, you can ignore it because the Microsoft auditing people ignore it as well, and it's not a core competency for determining your effective license position. When you pick an inventory scenario, you will then go into the next screen that says Discovery Methods. And here's where you got to stick with it and go nowhere else, sorry. We have a number of different methods to go get the data based upon the scenario that we just picked. So if we just picked Windows computers, that's what we're going to get. This is how we're going to get it. And there are underlying technologies. The big trick here is not to pick one, then stop, and then pick another one and keep going. What we have seen is that customers that do that, such as picking Active Directory, stopping, and then using Windows networking protocols and then continuing, will actually double up on their computers. Just because from a Windows networking protocol perspective, you will pick up the device name, and MAP will view that as a unique device. But if you go Active Directory, it will use FQDN, fully qualified domain names, which is a different computer name. It's a much larger computer name, but it is different. It becomes a different device. So do not mix these modes up, please. But we will talk about them very quickly. Active Directory, probably the one that you're going to use. This is where MAP will basically knock on Active Directory and get a list of your devices. And we'll use that as a list basically to call out each device and invoke a WMI inventory call. Windows networking protocol, that's kind of like the old Windows NT for work groups and whatnot. Using System Center Configuration Manager, haven't had a customer do this yet, but this is where you can actually tap in to the SCCM agent. Now, that being said, if you already have an SCCM agent, where you're using MAP for desktops, right? And if you tap into SCCM agent, you will run the risk of not finding a device that never had an SCCM agent on the first place. You just won't know it. Scanning an IP range can be done, but if you have subnets or items in DMZ, or basically if your Active Directory goes across more than one IP address range, then it's not going to work. The last two sound rather minor and non-incremental, but they're actually very significant. Manually entering a computer name and importing computer names from a file. Very strategic, and we're going to use that for both servers and hosts. But let's keep that in mind later, and let's keep moving on. So chances are, use Active Directory and domain services for your discovery method. After you do this, you're going to have to put in your Active Directory credentials. You're going to need read writes. You don't need write rights, but you're going to need Active Directory, basically admin rights. Hopefully you are that person. If not, get this person to do it for you or to offer you the rights, or get them to type it in themselves. And remember, the passwords are not saved. Eventually, you can go into Active Directory options and you can pick the forests and the trees and the subgroups and the OUs and all this kind of stuff. Really not required. You can even goof around with the credentials orders, but at the very end, you're going to click on Go and you're going to do an inventory. When you do the inventory, you're going to come back to this screen that we just came back, and you're going to go, oh my gosh, inventory success, 31%. What the heck happened here, right? And hold on, 6,000 devices? I don't have that many. What's going on? Again, we'll show you. If you click on the inventory results, if you click on that panel, you will come into something that looks like this, and you get to see the details. Now, the real details are found in the upper right-hand corner, excuse me, in the options, Generate Inventory Results Report. This is sort of what you got to do if you want to take a look and see what's going on. You click on that, and MAP will auto-generate an XLS file in a subdirectory for you. Pop open the subdirectory and show you the XLS file. You click on it, you'll open up Excel, and you will get access to data that looks like this. Now we've sort of squished some of the columns. There are a lot of columns, and yes, MAP does collect a lot of things. There's the IP address, there's the MAC address, there's a whole bunch of things. But most importantly are two columns. The one on the left-hand side is the WMI status. WMI is the Windows Management Instrumentation, right? And if the machine was successful, it'll say success, and you got a complete inventory. More likely, it's going to say failed. Failed machine not found, and failed RPC server unavailable, failed access denied. There's going to be, there may just be a lot of failed. Now, keep in mind at the end of this video, we're going to show you and going to offer you a WMI error code cheat sheet. And it's available for those who basically subscribe to our newsletter. Any new subscriber gets these documents from us. Yours to use. So you're going to get a lot of failures, which will drive down your success rate. But what will also drive down your success rate unintentionally is your AD. If you take a look on the far right-hand side, it says days since domain account update. And you'll see some machines have basically checked into the AD a couple days ago, and some have checked in a couple years ago. And so if you have a dirty AD, it will make your percentage success look lower. So you have to strip these out. You cannot take them into consideration. We suggest 45 days. You may want to play with 30 days or 60 days per se, but we think 45 days is a fair number. If a machine hasn't logged in 45 days, it's for a number of reasons. It's missing. That person, might be on vacation, who knows? But more importantly, it may be replaced or re-imaged. If a device is re-imaged, it will have an original AD name, and then when it's brought back, chances are it'll have another AD name. It's kind of like a phone book for a town where we forget to cross out the people who moved out, and we just keep adding the people that moved in. And that's what happens with generating a dirty AD, is that you're not managing the old devices that no longer are there. If you don't do that, MAP picks up the Active Directory list and assumes we can go with it, and there you go. There's machines. It's trying to inventory the machine that was last seen 3 years ago. Of course, it's not going to find it. It's probably been re-imaged or replaced. As well, your bad WMI configuration will also lower your success. We suggest this. Do not, first of all, for your desktops and also the servers, the servers may also be in here, do not try to attain 100% success. You will go Stark.Raving.Mad, right? The enemy of good enough is best. And also keep this in mind, is that the value proposition at the desktop is at the hundreds of dollars, maybe $200, $300 for your Microsoft rep. On the servers, tens of thousands. So we're going to put a lot more focus on the servers and hosts than the desktops. And furthermore, this sounds kind of wacky because I'm talking about MAP here and sounds like we love MAP. Yeah, if the attempt to correct all of the WMI errors that you're seeing on your failure list are too much to fix in time, abandon MAP when it comes to collecting your desktop information and pick up another tool. Chances are you already have something like SCCM, Altiris, Tivoli, Landesk, Lansweeper Case. Anything will do, right? You don't need to necessarily use MAP to get the desktops, and even if you do, they're not going to amount to much as far as licensing risk compared to servers. Now, how you can ascertain if your WMI corrections are too much, it really depends upon the error messages. The WMI error messages can be because lousy network, in other words, you got connection timeout, or improper admin rights at the machine level. In other words, it never accepted an admin in the first place. The WMI could be corrupt. You have to reboot the machine. Whole bevy of reasons. Take a look at our cheat sheet. Give us a call. We'll help you out, figure it out. But don't be afraid to abandon MAP if there's too much to do. And next, let's take a look at MAP for servers. Now, when you did your inventory for your Windows-based computers, you got both Windows desktops and servers. We did bring up the point that if your WMI issues were too much to be resolved in MAP, we did suggest abandon MAP for desktops, but you don't want to abandon MAP for servers. Servers and hosts is where you can save a boatload of money and where Microsoft makes all of their money. And MAP is the trick in both cases. And so here's the issue. If you do abandon the desktops, then you can, if you want, sniper MAP by collecting a list of the servers using an AD script and import those names into from a file. And instead of MAP going through the entire AD list again and generating all of these errors, you can use it to just go get the servers. Now, if you're going to do this, we suggest you start with a new database, start from scratch, and immediately import computer names from a file. And again, we have that huge script information on the cheat sheet to give you at the end of the show if and when you sign up. So that is one scenario. So if you don't, then you can ignore this. But if you do abandon the desktops, then we suggest you start from scratch and import the computer names from a file that you generated from an Active Directory script in order to find the devices that have Windows server-based operating systems. Much like clicking on desktop, when you run for the servers, you are focusing right now on Windows Server and, more importantly in our idea, the SQL Server. And so you click on Database. Now, this report scrolls. It's not really a report. It's more like a graph. It is misleading. Don't trust it. These are not installs. These are instances of databases being supported by the installation. So when you install Microsoft SQL Server, it starts off with its own little database. You can have more than one database on it, and that's a good thing. But for some reason, Microsoft decides to show you this detail first. Now, keep in mind that they're not necessarily assuming that you're using MAP for SAM, right? There are other reasons to show the number of instances of SQL Server 14 versus 12 in order to migrate, as an example, from SQL Server 2005 or 2008 to 2014. So there are other motives here. So don't take this verbatim and view it as, oh, this is the number of installations I have. You have to scroll down a bit to actually see what they call the licensed editions. Now, don't trust that either. These are not licensed. They are applicable to be licensed, but you have no idea if they're licensed, and neither does Microsoft, so don't trust that either. Furthermore, just like you generated an Excel report in the desktops, you can do it back on the servers as well. Oh yes, before we go, yes, servers, like their desktops, will have AD and WMI issues, but chances are to a lesser degree. The servers are there, and they're usually on site 7/24, but the WMI might be turned off, right? And if it is turned off, it's turned off intentionally. But your server admin can and has the power to basically re-invoke WMI and allow MAP to invoke the WMI call for inventory and get the data. So that can be done. So chances are you're either going to get all the servers or none, and that's what's going to happen. When you go into the SQL Server report, after you generate it and go into the subdirectory and take a look at the Excel file, you're going to get a SQL Server assessment file. Now, keep in mind that this is going to be messy. It comes in a summary, database instances, right, and component. And so taking a look at the database instances, what you have to do is strip out multiple instances, right, for each computer name. You want to get a unique instance for each computer name. That in mind, if a computer has two installations of a different version or a different edition of SQL Server, that downgrade rights and multiple use rights in most cases do not apply for Microsoft SQL Server. You have to keep them. So if you are going to strip out the instances, make sure that they are from the same SQL Server product name and server edition. The SQL Server product name you're going to see in the middle. The SQL Server edition you're going to see on the right. For your analysis, you really got to glue these things together. The SQL Server edition and the SQL Server product name should really be together so that you can see what you're doing. You can concatenate, or whatever that term is for Microsoft Excel, and generate a new one if you want. It's a little bit of spreadsheet kung fu, but it'll make life a lot easier for you. Then what you have to do when considering whether or not you're properly licensed for SQL Server, you also have to take the components into consideration. When SQL Server is installed, it usually by default installs a number of services. Analysis services, integration services, reporting services, and so on and so on. From the top of my head, the reporting services and the integration services, if they're found on the machine with the SQL Server on it, it's just a component. But if they are found in isolation, such as SQL Server reporting services found all by itself, then you are required to license it as if it was a full-fledged SQL Server Standard or Enterprise Edition. So effectively, these components are pseudo database instances as well. So what you have to do is merge the components with the SQL servers and then knock out what would be assumed device duplicates. You do have to take rogue and independent reporting services, analysis services, and so on into consideration. Don't assume that they are just a component and always free. Chances are, if you're caught with them, it can cost you $6, $8, $10, $12, $14, $16,000. A lot of money, so keep that in mind. From here, let's take a look at MAP for hosts. Collecting the host data is absolutely critical. Microsoft has virtualization rights for Windows Server and SQL Server. The virtualization rights, combined with the non-production state rights and the multiple usage rights, are configured in such a way or built in such a way that you can modify the configuration. One configuration of SQL Server on hosts might cost you $50,000, but you could reshuffle them or optimize the configuration. And the same number of SQL servers on the same number of hosts, but configured differently, could actually have you having too many licenses. And this is what you want to discover. So this is why collecting the host information is absolutely critical. Let's go into it. First of all, let's have an understanding of what's going on. This is where the realm of Windows or Microsoft's inventory technology starts to putter out, right? And we're looking into the world of VMware. And so what we have as an example in this picture provided by VMware is a diagrammatic sort of quick view of what a host is, what a VM is, and what a data center is, and effectively what a cluster can be. And we'll talk about clusters. So hosts, the ESXi hosts, the VMware hosts, as you can see them, there's 4 of them there, 2 of them on the side, are hosting virtualized servers that can be Windows, Sun, Unix, Linux, and so on. In our case, we're just really interested in the Microsoft Windows servers technology. Yes, they could do desktops too. They could actually do XP, but that's sort of silly. And what we have here is a data center. Now, the data center is a collection of hosts. If you group the hosts together in a data center, usually the term is usually interchanged, but it shouldn't be. It's called a cluster. A cluster is like a family. And when you put hosts inside of a cluster, you have the ability of doing what's called load balancing if you invoke the high mobility. And so what this means is, imagine the hosts being siblings, right? So you've got brother and sister, and they have children, right? And the children are the VMs, and you've got this one teenage kid, you know, you're a family of 6, like the host on the left-hand side. You got a teenage kid, that's a Windows server, that's just causing a little too much load for you. And you go, I can't handle him, right? Or her, usually her. It's like, and so you talk to your sister down the street there, the one in the middle, and go, you've only got 3 kids. Can you take care of mine for the weekend? Will I just deal with the other 5, right? And so that's called load balancing, because the original hosts are basically, they've run out of resources to properly support the Windows server. And so the Windows server, the VM, the image itself is moved from one host to another within that cluster. Now, that being said, Microsoft only allows the movement of these VM servers once every 90 days. And if it's discovered that these are moving within 90 days or a period shorter than 90 days, then your software assurance gets activated. In other words, you have to pay for software assurance. So if you think you can do load balancing in 3-month periods, which is highly unlikely, right? Then you're good. But if you are doing load balancing with high mobility and generating clusters, then you are responsible for software assurance. And the rules and the licensing are completely different. We're going to talk about that later. Here's the fun thing though. MAP will not, at the current version of MAP 9.3, from what we configure, can't identify the cluster, but it can identify the hosts. Now, chances are most of you have this type of environment where your hosts are interrelated in a cluster. And that's actually a good thing from an inventory perspective, because there's a trick. Now, the way that MAP is set up, you usually put in your VMware credentials for each ESXi host, and here in this example, you would have to do it 4 times if the passwords and credentials are different, and if they're same, you put it in once, right? There's no rhyme or reason in MAP as to, all right, this credential goes to this machine, that goes to that machine. Basically, you type in the credential like a bunch of keys, and MAP will take one key and put it in, and hopefully 1, 2, 3, the third one made it, right? And it's able to do inventory. You really don't want to do that if you are using vCenter Server, because there's a trick. Let's show you. What we want to do is actually not inventory the hosts, but we want to capture the data that's already stored in the vCenter Server. Now, the vCenter Server has to know where everything is as far as the VMs are concerned. So it has a list, and we want to get that list, and MAP can do it using this method. So basically, we're now at the VMware section. You need to manually enter a computer name and credential in the discovery method. And of course, sorry, I'm just going to roll back up for a minute here. You have to put in the VMware computers and deselect Windows computers, because we're only dealing with VMware computers at this time, right? Once you're in there, inside the discovery methods, you will get down to the enter computers manually. And basically you want to click on create. And again, all of this is in our little cheat sheet as well. And here is where you you declare the computer name. And so it's probably your vCenter server, and you type whatever the name is, and then you put in your credentials, which I typed in incorrectly here. If you do it in this context, MAP will collect the stored information from the one vCenter server rather than you requiring to go to every single host. If the credentials are wrong on the host, you won't get an error message, right? And chances are your level of success and the amount of time will go down. So your level of success will be high, and your amount of success, your level of effort will go down if you approach it from a vCenter server. That being said, whether you're doing vCenter server or your hosts, if there's no host information there, you actually don't get an error message like you do with WMI. And you can go back to your server virtualization, take a look at your discovery method, and you can also take a look at the reports. But some of the problems is that you don't know what you don't know. If it absolutely skips a host, it won't show you that it skipped a host because there's no responding, I'm not available to be inventoried from a host perspective like WMI does for a Windows computer. That sort of response mechanism is not there on the ESXi machines. So you get a null response. So you don't know if you got a response. That being said, a little plug for our service here is that what we've done, our customers use a utility on top of the MAP database called Echo, and we'll show it to you later on in the cheat sheet as well. And Echo is able to reverse engineer the fact that the hosts are missing. How we do it is by considering the children without hosts to be orphans. If you're a server and we know that you are virtual, not physical, and there's many ways to do that, if we can't see your association to the parent, you're an orphan. And that in itself assumes that machines that a host was missing, and we tell you that go find it. That being said, we're done with that section, and let's do a recap and talk about the devil in the details. Understand that there are no effective reports for viewing data at the desktop level or for understanding what we'll call the consolidated Windows or SQL Server review in a virtualized environment. Sure, we do have server views, we've got SQL Server views, we have Office views, and even Visio views. We'll show those to you, but they're rudimentary at best. To give you an example, if you go into the Office panel and you generate a spreadsheet, you will get this, right? You will see Office Visio Professional 2007, right? Everything is identified as an individual Office product. In that case, it's probably true. But so are the Microsoft Office XP web components. And that, yes, is a product, but it's not auditable. So keep that in mind. Although, as well, taking a look, you can see along the top, Office Visio Standard 2007 and 2007, 2007. What makes them different? Slight variation in the version. So this data needs to be squished. And so that's what you're going to have to deal with the map data generated with the XLS. That's what you have to work with, right? Also keep in mind that this is an inventory tool. There are no usage rights calculated in any report. In other words, non-production states for SQL Server saying, hey, I'm MSDN, or I'm dev, or I'm a hot backup, or multiple use rights saying, oh, I've got Office Visio 2007 and 2010 standard on the machine. I don't have to count 7, right? That's not in here. There's no magic bullet for it from an inventory perspective, right? A little bit of a plug here. Some of the reports that the Asset Labs services do is that, yeah, we do the calculations. We identify where the licenses go. We identify whether or not that instance of SQL Server is testing or development. We allocate the licenses in an optimized method. This is completely outside the scope of MAP. MAP just doesn't do this. And again, no magic bullet. The production states of SQL Server are not electronically declared. They're declared by your server admin, so someone's got to do this, right? Keep that in mind, and that's where the real money can be saved, right? After all this information is collected, you have to go back to your server admins and go, help me knock out $23,000 here and $68,000 there by saying development. Is that development? Yeah, okay, development, right? He knocks it out, and therefore no license required. MAP does not do this, so beware. As well, we talked about multiple use rights, and the fact is, yeah, you can actually have two products of a different version, so Office Pro 2013 and Office Pro 2007 on the same machine at the same time. You don't have to pay for 2007 underneath your volume license agreement. As long as it's still pending, then you've got multiple usage rights per se. Again, MAP doesn't do that kind of math. Right? So MAP is not a SAM tool, right? And also keep in mind that the Microsoft, when doing a soft audit, and the SAM partners don't look at the reports. Neither should you. Like, the value is actually hiding in those spreadsheets and gluing everything together and stapling it all together. It's hidden within the database as well if you wanted to open it up, right? So as a recap, let's just go through some of the points. Yep, MAP is cool. It's free. It's inventory only, and that is it. Understand its original intent was for an assessment and planning. It's picking up data points for other reasons. They just happen to be congruent with an inventory process, and it works pretty well in most cases, right? MAP does see all. You know, as we showed you, you can identify MAC addresses, IP addresses. It will identify and does record the software installed of other vendors. So all of the Adobe products are in there. All of your Autodesk is in there. Everything is in there. Even though there's no reports to show it, it's in the database. Now the question is, who are you going to give it to, right? And underneath what context? Think NDA. Excuse me. Don't goof around with the different inventory methods. If you start with Windows networking and then you go, oh, that's not right, let's do IP addresses, scratch the database. Do not mix the different inventory methods. You will double up on the devices, wholly or partially. Do run MAP in parts. Do Windows first, right? Get the Windows desktops and servers. Yeah, click on Exchange, click on the link. Don't worry about SWID tags for now. Then go back and unselect those and then go for the VMware computers. Do it in pieces. MAP will remember and add data to it. One thing I didn't bring up before is once you're done with the MAP inventory, never use it again. Scratch that database, park it as a back file. Do not reuse MAP without resetting the database. Otherwise, it'll just keep adding more stuff on there. Again, it's not a management tool, right? It's a simple desktop inventory, host server inventory utility, right? Beware of dirty AD and messy WMI, right? The dirty AD is a false positive, so that's fine. Don't worry about it. But the messy WMI, the Windows Management Instrumentation, ditch MAP for desktops if you consider that the WMI issues are too large and too significant to resolve in a short amount of time. It's just not worth it. And keep in mind, at the desktop level, your exposure is at a couple $100 versus tens of thousands of dollars at the server level. Understand where the real cost risk is. Going for the hosts, if you can, go for vCenter server rather than each host. By collecting that information, you will reduce the amount of time and increase the data fidelity remarkably. The reports are misleading. Don't trust them, he says, trying to do his best. Ben Kenobi. Yeah, don't look at the reports in context to a SAM assessment. Take a look at the spreadsheets, understand that they need massaging. Go look into the database. You know, Microsoft and the third-party vendors, none of us look at the reports because they're out of context from a SAM perspective, right? Again, no usage rights calculations or the PERS, purchase usage rights, are calculated or deduced or available to be entered within MAP. That's up to you to do it. Still has to be done. That's where the biggest cost savings are. Seek legal counsel to deter or defer MAP submission in whole or in part. Right? Microsoft is asking for a review. The usage of MAP is not compulsory. At the same time, there's an entire industry with third-party SAM providers, SAM Gold partners, and third-party contractors. They've industrialized the MAP data, sucking in, putting into another system, and all this kind of stuff. Very, very easy for them to do, and it allows them to get off you and move on to somebody else very quickly. But all of your data is being seen and stored and retained. So you need to work with legal counsel to somehow allow the third party to scrub the data or redact the data in some context, or not even use MAP based upon on the assumption, hey, you can't get the desktop data with MAP. Use SCCM, use something else. Keep that in mind. And if you have SCCM, it's easier for you to, as an example, strip out the vendors, because your SCCM crew probably inherently know how to do that. They know their database, they may not know MAP. Lastly, and we're finishing up here, for those who want a little more information, this is available to you. All you got to do is tell us who you are and subscribe to our newsletter. Honestly, guys, the newsletter is powered by MailChimp, so don't bother, with a Gmail. Put in your real email address. You can unselect as you want. We tend not to barrage you with information, but we do give a lot of technical data and industry data. The last thing that we just sent out was the fact that Windows Server is going to go from proc to core, and that now creates a documentation issue. So we'd like to keep you up to breast as to what's going on here. So we've got two particular resource files for you to use: resolving MAP's WMI error messages as a PDF, and also using the MAP toolkit. We might even send you the Echo one as well, but these are definitely, you can use. It's independent of our licensing services that we provide, though we do provide it to our customers as well. It's down to the core function as to what you have to do, regardless of whether you use our service or not. We'd like to offer it to you. All you have to do is sign up for the Asset Labs newsletter, and if you have any questions, email us, please. We'd love to answer any questions that you may have to the best of our ability. map@assetlabs.com. For that, I'm Steve O'Halloran. Thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, please contact us, and we hope to hear from you soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.